This video is about Iran and how Iran is controlled opposition, and that they've been building up to this war with Iran for a long time. And here we have Benito Mussolini. He was an MI5 agent, and he got his start in politics through being an agent, and was paid £100 a week in 1917. Now you see that the First World War and the Second World War, as well as the wars with Napoleon, were controlled wars, and they were run by Freemasons and funded by the Rothschilds. And the Third World War, which is coming, is the same. It is a war that is controlled on both sides. So the Iranians are controlled, and so is the West. And the deaths will be real, but at the very highest level the war will be controlled by both sides, because wars need to be funded, and so you need a funding stream and supply stream to make wars possible in the present century. And so both the West and both America, Israel and Iran will be funded in this next war, and this next war is there to change society, like World War I and World War II. They are wars that are there to change society, in the Napoleonic Wars. Okay, so we have here Benito Mussolini. He was an MI5 agent. Now we're going to look at Khomeini. And there's lots of rumours that Khomeini's father was actually an Englishman, and he worked for an oil company, British oil company in Iran, and he was given sanctuary in France, and he was actually put into power by the French and British and Americans, and his father's real name was actually William Richards Williamson. That was his father's real name. He was a British man, and even in Iran they didn't accept that he was a true Iranian. And there's lots of evidence and writers who has said that Khomeini was a British agent. Okay, so here's his real father here. His real father was born in 1872 of British parents, and he worked for the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. Now remember that name, because it then became BP, and we're going to talk about that more, and how Iran since about 1870 has been completely controlled by the British. Now what I mean by the British Empire is actually controlled by the Rothschild family and by Freemasonry. Okay, so that's what you got to remember. Okay, so lots of evidence that Khomeini was a British agent and was actually half British himself, and his father worked for British Petroleum, what is now British Petroleum. Okay, now let's play a little clip of this film. Okay, it's about 1979.
Gathered in Guadeloupe, we're preparing for the upcoming G7 summit in Tokyo, smiling reassuringly for the cameras in their shirt sleeves. In reality, the mood was far less serene. In Iran, the situation had become untenable. As international protests condemned the Shah's dictatorship, the country was sinking into chaos, and oil production had almost completely stopped. France was eager to be rid of an embarrassing guest they had been hosting for several months.
Now this little show is full of Western propaganda, but you can see that when the Iranian Revolution happened, the Americans, the British and the French already knew that they were going to get rid of the Shah. Now the Shah was a puppet of America, okay, but they wanted to get rid of him because they wanted to radicalize Islam, and Iran. And why they wanted to do that was to give Israel an enemy, so that in the future this war would happen. Okay, so if you want Israel to expand as a country, you need enemies, and so they constructed Iran as an enemy, and they put into power their agent Khomeini. Okay, and he was living in Paris, and they flew him in. They flew him in after the revolution.
Ayatollah Khomeini. The four heads of state came to a decision. The Shah would have to resign and leave Iran, and the aging cleric, who they knew little about, would be allowed to return to stabilize the country.
Now, there you see, the four decided to put Khomeini into power, and they lie about that they did not know much about Khomeini, because in this Guardian article, it says the US had extensive contact with Ayatollah Khomeini before Iran revolution. So you can clearly see it contradicts that bit of news you just heard. Okay, and there's even on Wikipedia there is a page dedicated to the Iranian public's belief that the British control Iran, and they do. But the thing is that what we know of the British Empire as the British Empire is actually run by Freemasons, the Rothschilds, and other banking families. That's who runs the British Empire and the British Crown. Okay, so you can see there's well established theories and research by even American writers that show that Khomeini was linked to the CIA and was an agent, as you see there. Okay, and so let's play a little bit more.
And preserve the economic interests of the West.
I heard about the Guadalupe conference. I think it was there that they decided that if the Shah goes and Khomeini comes, it's not such a disaster for the West.
All of a sudden, the mainstream of media, they started talking about Khomeini as a big shot, as a big, actually, fighter of the Shah, which it was not.
There was this great propaganda strategy, and the European media fell into the trap because that image was really too idyllic, almost like a Garden of Eden. Khomeini never failed to state that everything he did would be determined by Islam.
He had always dreamt of a state in which Sharia law would rule. A very important part of it was the rights of women, the family law, and everything. That was why he had been sent into exile, because he had objected to the right of women to vote.
On French television, Khomeini...
Now watch this footage and notice, have a look at his hands, okay?
...was asked who would rule Iran when the Shah was gone.
There. So this program is part truth, part propaganda. So it shows you that the British and Americans and French actually put him into power. That they decided that he would replace the Shah. Now you can see on his little finger he has a pinky ring. Okay, now let's have a look at the symbolism of the pinky ring. It symbolizes British aristocracy and links to secret societies, and it also is connected with homosexuality. Now the two main points is that it's connected to the British aristocracy and secret societies, as you can see in this gentleman's guide to the pinky ring.
Rings only on their pinky finger. Later in Victorian times, men and women could wear a pinky ring to indicate that they were weren't interested in marriage. When wedding bands for men became more popular, oftentimes they would stash their signet ring and...
So, slightly before that, he says that the British had the tradition, the British aristocracy, you can see it in many paintings, they had the tradition of wearing the little finger, and it shows you that they weren't interested in marriage, okay?
and their wedding ring on their pinky finger.
There's Prince Charles, he wears it on his pinky finger.
Of the same hand. In the 20th
There's lots of rumours about Prince Charles.
century, a new approach to clothing came about, and it was much less about tradition and more about...
There, so the British had a ring on their pinky finger to denote their upper class ancestry and connections with secret societies. Okay, so I've gone through how they put Khomeini in power and how he had connections with the United States before the revolution. Okay, so this is the Shah in his interview, and in this interview, I don't know if this is the specific one, but he talks to American TV, and he says that the Americans deposed him, even though they put him into power, because he replaced Mossadegh, and Mossadegh was probably also a Freemason, but he was a leader that wanted to partly nationalize Iranian oil, and the Americans and the British didn't like this, so they had him killed, and then they brought the Shah into power, and then eventually they overturned the Shah because they wanted to radicalize Iran so that it became an enemy for Israel, so that in the future Israel will fight a war and Israel will be able to expand its territory. That is what this coming war is about. And we can see here on Iranian history how the British got involved with Iran, and how it's slowly the influence of the British actually became the leading dominant force in Iran. Okay, so the British actually occupied it in the 1920s. Okay, so in here, in this bit, the relationships between the British and the Iranians, you see that here is a quote that the Shah of Iran, the then Shah